Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. Back again to talk about the Augmentation Evoker nerfs and a couple of the other hotfixes that they have going on starting up on Tuesday. So it's currently Friday night at the moment, and they just announced these changes that are happening come Tuesday, which is also right in the middle of the Great Push. So there's a minor nerf for Ursoc's Fury with Guardian, but Augmentation, of course, is getting a number of nerfs coming into it with Closest Clutch Mates, which is the buff, of course, whenever you're in a 5-man environment towards your Might and Breath of Eons, is now going to be 20% more effective when not in a raid, instead of 40%. They're also working on increasing the personal damage of Augmentation Evoker, while reducing the effectiveness of some of their buffs, specifically for dungeons themselves. As they're still kind of trying to figure out some of the hooks and the extra damage contribution. I know there's a number of bugs, and they've talked about that for raids at the moment. So they're focusing instead on Mythic Plus. Might now increases the Evoker's damage by 20% instead of 10%. Eruption damage has been increased by 40%. And then Fate's Mirror, which I believe is the replication on Prescience, is now reduced to 15% instead of 20%. But perhaps the biggest of the changes is the Aspect's Favor. This is the bonus stamina that you're getting. So instead of getting 16% extra stamina for you and all your allies every time Scales is activated, it now gets brought down to 10%. And honestly, I think this is probably the largest of the changes. The Evoker Discord and everything, the Wormrest Temple, they just did a whole bunch of math. Shout out to Sailder from Wormrest Temple. And he was saying that it's about a 3% damage nerf overall for Augmentation in a dungeon environment, because they're reducing the damage benefits of Might and Breath of Eons with Closest Clutch Mates, but they're also increasing the personal damage from some of the Might personal contribution and from the Eruption damage increase itself. So all of these combined together is going to result in a slight damage nerf, still making the spec incredibly powerful, because the other specs that are really good in Mythic Plus also didn't get nerfed very heavily when it comes to just how they deal lots of damage in keys. You know, Mage being still powerful, Shadow Priest being still powerful. We were seeing 30s being done. I don't know why they're in Azure Vault, but, you know, whatever reason, for the Great Push, we were seeing 29s and 30s when it came down to some of the time trials. And a very big reason for it is the combination of Augmentation allowing really heavy burst damage through Breath of Eons and the Might uptime to synergize with bursty specs and kind of like double stacking, triple stacking buffs, when you can PI a Mage and have Prescience and have Might and have Breath of Eons rolling all at the same time. You just annihilate these super large trash packs, which is kind of just what you have to do in a dungeon environment anyway to chest these higher level dungeons. And bringing stamina is something that no other spec in the game is doing. So the strengths of Augmentation Evoker are still there and are still ridiculously insane, to the point that they would have to really heavily start changing around some of the other specs, like Mage or like Shadow Priest, or instead start buffing other things, as you can start seeing buffs coming in for Hunter, Marks, as well as Survival coming into the mix. We got, I think this is actually a really small damage buff for Windwalker, and then of course they're nerfing Brewmaster for whatever reason, increasing prop pally damage. Oh, look at that, Luminous Barrier increased by 30%. A whole heap of shadow changes. I believe most of this was like single target buffs, but again, not a shadow expert onto this one. And then, hey, a little bit of like Resto Shaman buffs coming into the mix. So in order to actually really change a lot of like what Augmentation Evoker would be bringing to the table, they'd have to really substantially start altering what specs are really good in Mythic Plus and how they start delivering a lot of their damage in Mythic Plus. Since you can sort of like massively super stack buffs on top of high burst class players, it allows you to do these what they call like timing pulls in really high keys. This is most of like how the Great Push stuff operates, is you do these massive pulls that allow everybody to stack, you know, the tank's defensives, the healer's massive cooldowns, damage reduction, DPS blasting as hard as they possibly can. You annihilate a huge pull, and then you sort of like start the boss fight, or you go into like a smaller pull, or you do RP, or whatever it might be, right? You get time to be able to get those cooldowns back before you start taking these larger risks. And a lot of what makes these dungeon groups successful is being able to pull and survive this high damage, high stress environments and kill it fast enough before damage catches up with them, before cooldowns run up, before defensives run out. As a result, Augmentation is just kind of perfect for this environment, and I don't think that they're really going to be getting phased out of high-end Mythic Plus anytime soon. This might start putting more pressure on the healer, since, of course, Ebon Might is now not going to be buffing the healer quite as much as before. You're not going to have quite as much stamina as before, but it's still going to be a really noticeable gap between having an augmentation in the group and not having one. And for that, augmentation still is going to be one of the best specs you can be able to bring into the game, as long as you have, of course, good, strong players who are operating bursty specs in the game. And so in order to really start changing around how augmentation would be like more or less viable or competitive, they'd really have to start like buffing melee, if anything. They'd have to like buff melee, maybe make like healer damage very similar, maybe make some of the specs who deal steadier damage, I guess, be a bit less valuable. But no spec in the game that operates in a DPS role is bringing this, you know, perma 4% stamina that can go up to 10% bonus stamina for the entire party on a very regular basis, and bringing Zephyr for damage reduction on top of it. So it's kind of odd. I personally think that they're probably going to get rid of Aspect's favor from like a long-term basis, because I think it is really still super insane having something operating in the DPS role. It's not a new fourth role or anything. It's still considered a DPS and balanced around that, or at least that's what they say it is. So I'd be surprised if Aspect's favor for like Season 3 would actually be staying at such a high level or a strong level, because otherwise, I mean, you pretty much are locking one spec out of like 18 or 20 different damage specs in the game. You're like locking this one spec in there permanently for a 5-man environment, and it already brings lust and good dispels as well, and off healing and damage reduction. I don't know how they would do that, but let me know what you guys think. That's our quick update. Again, big shout out to Wormrest Temple for the math, and Sailder, of course, for, I think he was EU and waking up for this, so shout out to him. Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you have any other questions, feel free to drop in the description down below. Be sure to sub to the channel, and I'll catch you all next time.